I'm Eric Marcus, and this is Making Gay History. During the summer of 1984, I had a brief stint in politics. I'd landed a job as assistant press secretary to the president of my home borough of Queens, New York. My real interest had been electoral politics for myself. I'd wanted to one day run for New York City Council, but there was no such thing as an out gay city council member at the time. I'd even felt compelled to go back in the closet to get this behind-the-scenes job. A bad move. I was miserable pretending to be straight, and I quit after 6 weeks. It's hard to imagine how few openly gay elected politicians there were back then, at any level of government. At the federal level, there was exactly one. Massachusetts Congressman Gary Studs, and he hadn't come out of the closet so much as been ejected from it during a sex scandal. But in 1987, a more inspiring landmark of LGBTQ history was reached. That's when another Democratic representative from Massachusetts, Barney Frank, became the first member of the U.S. Congress to voluntarily come out as gay. Barney Frank was born in 1940 in Bayonne, New Jersey. He moved to Massachusetts when he landed a spot at Harvard. In 1957, that was no small accomplishment for a Jewish working-class kid. He majored in government and was soon recognized as something of a political prodigy. By the time he came out, he'd worked in politics for 2 decades and had established himself as a well-respected, sharp-witted champion of the underdog. Not a slick, baby-kissing glad-hander, but a man who wanted to get things done. So here's the scene. It's June 1st, 1989. I've arranged to interview Congressman Frank at his office in Washington, D.C. I'm excited. Frank's one of my heroes. And I'm nervous because of his reputation for being impatient and gruff. He also has a reputation for being less than concerned about his appearance, rumpled suits and bad haircuts. But the man who greets me across his tidy, uncluttered desk is tanned and well-dressed. I clip a microphone to his lapel and brace myself to keep up with his trademark rapid-fire speech. A quick note. You'll hear Congressman Frank mention Robert Bauman. Bauman was a closeted Republican congressman whose political career went up in smoke after he was caught soliciting sex from a 16-year-old boy. He also mentions Tip O'Neill, who was a long-serving Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Harper & Row publishing the book, fall of '91. And I was speaking to people all across the country, from all walks of life.
All right, that's enough. What subject do you want to cover with me?
What I'd like to talk about is starting with some of your early aspirations. The sort of first question is why run for Congress? Knowing that you're gay.
Which I certainly did. Well, I've always been interested in politics. I'm an early TV kid. I'm 49 years old. I was born in 1940. And so when they first started televising things, the Kefauver hearings, and then the Republican and Democratic conventions, and then the Army McCarthy hearings when I was anywhere from 11, 12 to 14 years old, I was fascinated with them. And by 1954, I found I had a kind of a rooting interest in the Democrats winning elections. I didn't think of having an active political career. The fact that I was gay, which I knew from the time I was 13, was not the primary reason. For me, being Jewish also seemed like a pretty big handicap in the 1950s. And I grew up in Bayonne, New Jersey, part of Hudson County, which back then was boss-ridden, corrupt. You just didn't think about a political career in the normal sense. You had to kind of apprentice yourself to an organization that was dominated by the corruptest part of the Teamsters and the longshoremen, and Jews were not very welcome. So I thought of this as a kind of a fascinating spectator sport. Then I got away to college. This was Brookline, Massachusetts, and I said, oh, this is great. I can sort of participate. And I was active in Young Democrats. But I just assumed that I would be, as an undergraduate, I decided I would be professionally a professor. And that I would be a professor who was always interested in politics. And so from that period, really from 57 till 67, I had about 10 years in which I worked actively on other people's campaigns. And I worked for some people who won, some people who lost. I never really thought about going to work there full time. I thought I could be an advisor and a participant in that way. And then at some point I might get an appointed position that would be of interest. And then in 1967, after 5 years of graduate school in which I was not really making much progress on a thesis, I got asked by some mutual friends if I would go to work for a guy named Kevin White, who was running for mayor of Boston, primarily because he was running against Louise Day Hicks. And she was a racist and was running in a racist way. And I went to work for White to help defeat her. And after a month, when he won, he said to me, would you come work for me? And I was shocked. I said, no, I got to do this and that. And he insisted, and I said, yeah, maybe I should do that. So I went to work for him for 3 years. And at that point, my sexuality was not an issue because I had been so closeted as an academic. And I mean, I was very repressed and closeted.
When you say closeted?
Well, closeted, I never told another human being in the whole world that I was gay, other than people with whom I was interested in having sex. And there were not very, very many of those. I mean, there was a recent scandal. They accused people of having sex with minors, and somebody said, are you worried? I said, listen, I haven't had sex with a minor since I was a minor, and I didn't have that much then. But I didn't have anything to lose by going to work for the mayor at that time, because I couldn't have been any more closeted and repressed than I was as an academic. This is the 1960s. This is pre-Stonewall.
Right. Were you aware even at that time that there was anything going on in the world of gay rights? Or that
Not much, because there did not seem to be that much, and I was very much cut off from it. Mm-hmm. I did not know very much at all. And I went to work for Kevin White, and that was a very absorbing job. And after 3 years, I'm a nervous eater. I weighed 270 pounds, about 75 more than I should have. I was exhausted. I enjoyed it, but I was worn out. And so I quit working for him at the end of 3 years to go back to school to say, all right, now I'm going to write a PhD thesis about this, because I still thought of myself at that point as an academic on temporary absence. I spent a few months trying to be an academic, and I realized I didn't have the discipline. I did try to lose weight, and there was some sort of, I began to think about how do I deal with my sexuality? What do I do about it? And am I going to live a repressed life? I don't want to do that.
Was it a personal discussion, something you talked about in your own head?
Right. Nobody else. Never talked to anybody about it.
Well, that's awfully lonely.
Yeah, it was. Terribly lonely. One guy who I had known when he was an undergraduate and I was a graduate student, he figured out that I was gay and talked to me about it in a very sympathetic way, and a couple other people did. I read at that time The Best Little Boy in the World. Talked about it with a couple of people there. I don't remember what I said, but just, well, they were just sort of generally encouraging without being specific. Just, do what you need and your friends will be there, whatever you want. And by that time, I should say, I decided I was going to be a politician, not an academic. But I still thought of myself as an appointed politician. So I got a phone call from a friend who was a congressman, Michael Harrington, a liberal Democrat who was a congressman from Massachusetts, who I admired a lot. And he said, come down and be my chief assistant. I said, sure. So I came down here for a year, and interestingly, this is 71 and 72. I was in better physical condition. I'd lost a lot of weight. I was 31 years old, and I still was a total abstainer down here. I was still too frightened and repressed. And then I came back up one day, and a friend of mine said, the state representative from this district, Morris Fry, who was a Republican, is retiring. Why don't you run for the job? Well, I had gotten fairly well known as the aide to the mayor. And I said, geez, do you think I could win? I mean, I didn't think I was much of a candidate. Once a woman was interviewing me on some other issue having to do, I think, with handicapped people, said, you seem to have a particular interest in kind of outsiders. Is there any special reason why you're concerned about outsiders? And I wanted to say, listen, you try growing up as a gay left-handed Jew, and then you'll know something about being an outsider. I didn't say that to her, but I said that to me a lot. So I just thought, they're going to, I'm not going to, nobody's going to vote for me. And the friend said, well, yeah, run. So I ran, and I won. Now, I won in a district that was very unusual at the time. It was Back Bay, Beacon Hill. It didn't have a large gay population then. It has a larger one now. But it had a very cosmopolitan population. It was a socially quite liberal and tolerant place on things like abortion, et cetera. I thought to myself then, okay, look, am I ever going to have a private life or not? And I really want one. And
you were already in your
I was 32 years old.
It's a long time to go without a personal life.
Yeah. And it lasted until I was 40 and had very negative consequences. I said, okay, I'm going to run for office. And as I run for office, I'm going to have to be repressed. And I can't do anything about it. I'm going to have to be closeted. But I'm going to be supportive of gay rights. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do the right thing publicly. Basically what I said was, I'm going to have to deny me, but I don't think anybody else should be denied. And at that point, in 1972, when I came up to run, gay rights activity was just beginning in Boston. There was the Daughters of Bilitis, it was a lesbian organization, and the Homophile Union of Boston. And I just started working with them. And I became the major supporter of the gay rights bill. I didn't think at that point I would be able to go beyond being a state legislator because of the reasons, being gay and Jewish and maybe too liberal and not considering myself to be a great public figure. I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I better enjoy it. So I said, I'm not going to take any positions that I don't think are right. And it turned out that was one of the things I was better at than other things. I mean, I had not been a very good academic, but I was a pretty good politician and particularly a legislator. So I kept that up. And as far as being gay was concerned, I started having more physical expressions, but still not much in the way of emotion. It wasn't until the mid to late 70s that I began to talk. It was crazy. I was active with other gay people. I just couldn't even tell them. I can't explain to you now, the emotional distance is so great, I can't tell you why. I just couldn't do it. Didn't feel comfortable, didn't do it. Some of them figured it out, but I kept on that way until finally, late in the 70s, I decided that I was very frustrated with the legislature. I don't want it to stay there anymore. And by 1979, I was getting pretty depressed. I figured, well, I've spent 7 years in the legislature. I sacrificed my personal life. I'm 39 years old. My 40th birthday was coming. And where the hell am I? I'm not acting like a normal human being, and I was feeling sorry for myself. So I started to come out to people. First, I told a couple of gay people. And then I began to come out to some straight people. My siblings. I have 2 sisters and a brother, and their spouses.
Any negative reactions?
None. In general, the straight people to whom I came out said I should tell them and not too many other people. One of the things I found about coming out, most straight people think that they're not prejudiced, but other straight people are. When I ultimately, in 1987, when we polled, 20% of the people in my district said that it bothered them that I was gay. 45% said they assumed it bothered people. It's kind of like, don't tell mother.
Right. I remember coming out, I remember how terrifying it was. It must have been both terrifying and a relief.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was, doing it at first was very emotional, and I could, hear the violins playing, and coming out, was one of the times it would take me 3 or 4 days to get up the emotional energy to do it, and a week to recover from having done it. I could have lived to be 106, I would have come out to 1,000 people. No more. It just would have taken me that long.
Right.
But at any rate, I started coming out and started socializing with other gay people. And then all of a sudden, the Pope announced that he did not want Father Drinan to run for Congress again. And I decided I would run for the seat, move and run, and bang, shut the door again.
Why the decision to go back in the...
Well, because I couldn't win for Congress if I was coming out. I knew that I couldn't win as a first-time candidate if people were focusing only on my sexuality.
Which is still true today.
Yeah. So I ran for Congress. I won.
What did you do to shut the closet, though?
Well, I stopped telling people. I had only told really reliable people, so they didn't tell anybody else. But then I got down to Washington in 1981, and I said, okay, I'm going to live in Washington as a gay man. And I began to come out to the gay community totally in Washington. And
How did you do that?
I through friends, began going to parties and meeting other people, and from that time on, I lived as a pretty openly gay person in Washington, but not publicly gay. But down here, as up there, I was as supportive of gay rights as it was possible to be. I've always, but part of it was, well, people are going to think I am, and I'd say, well, they'd think if I was, I wouldn't, and it became like getting your hair cut with 19,000 mirrors, and the hell with it, I figured it's going to cancel out. Plus, I think my support of gay rights was consistent with my support of minority group rights, and I'd been to Mississippi in the summer of '64, and I had a pretty good record on women's issues and handicapped issues, and so that made sort of sense. And I became increasingly then to start, but even in 81 and 82, I was socializing some. I was still under a lot of pressure because I knew I was running for a tough re-election fight in '82 with Margaret Hecker.
Did that issue come up over?
There were rumors about it and some talk about it. One of the, John Hecker, her ex-husband, I'm told, said at some fundraisers, now I'm going to do something that Peg's opponent can't do, introduce our children. So
Did you
there
just
was
ignore that?
Yeah. I was frightened by it. I didn't know how I would handle it if it had come out. And I don't know what I would have done if I was asked. I might have lied. I'm not
You were
proud of
never
that,
asked.
but I was never asked. So then I came back down having won. I said, okay, now I got to have a real life. I mean, at this point, I said, okay, now I can resume this life. That's when I began to diet and come out to more people. And so from 83 on, even more than before, I mean, I started, worrying about how I looked and changing my hair and getting contact lenses and stuff. And began to date in 1984 was when I really first felt good about myself, and I began dating people in 1984.
At the age of 44?
Yeah.
You suddenly became a teenager.
Right, exactly. I said to people, I had my teens and my 20s, and I think I'm up to about my 30s now. But anyway, I began then and I then said, okay, I'm going to come out at some point. I mean, some point in 85, 86, I decided that I really had an obligation to do it and that it would be helpful and that I could survive it. The press started asking me about it. And it became clear to me that the press wasn't going to write about it until I told them to. Now, I don't know if that would still be the case.
What kinds of things did they ask?
They say, can we write about the fact that you're gay? I say, no. They say, okay. Why not? I said, well, it's nobody's business. I mean, a lot of them wanted to write about it, but they didn't want to be accused of being intrusive. So then evolved to a point where I would sort of joke about it. I mean, I spoke to the Human Rights Campaign Fund in Boston, public events, and the guy introduced me to saying I was no Johnny-come-lately to gay rights because I'd been doing it since '73. And I said, I didn't hear exactly what he said. Did he say I was no Johnny-come-out-lately? I mean, I would not make a public announcement of being gay, but I would do anything else. It was my strategy of leaking myself out. So I began to tell other members. I was asked at this meeting at the Kennedy School. I spoke to the first meeting of the gay group, the public meeting. Congressman, are you aware that many gay people are upset when prominent people who are gay are asked about that and avoid giving a direct answer to the question? I waited about 30 seconds and I said, you have to forgive me, I'm trying to think of a way to avoid giving a direct answer to that question. And that was in the paper. I mean, I don't know if people knew or didn't know or I mean, I was introduced at one point as a good friend of the community, and I said, well, I thought that somewhat understated the connection. But I wanted people to sort of figure it out, and because when I did come out, I wanted my colleagues to say, hey, look, it doesn't make any difference to us. It will not make him less effective, and others to say that. And then in 1986, Robert Bauman wrote his book, and he mentioned me, brought me out, quite, I think, unjustifiably and irresponsibly.
The title of the book?
The Gentleman from Maryland. He said, there were even gay people in Congress. He mentioned Gary Studds, who of course was out by then, and he said his witty liberal Massachusetts colleague, Barney Frank, goes to the Gay Pride Day in Washington with his usual young companion. Frank's picture is in the Washington gay paper wearing a tank top, and nobody comments. Well, in the first place, I was with a friend who was not, the implication was that it was a sex partner. Right. The other problem was, and that was inaccurate, when Bauman said young, I mean, the guy was 27 at the time. By Bauman standards, that's geriatric. I mean, so people say, oh, young, was he another one with a 15-year-old? But I was really very resentful of that. And Bauman had no business doing that. So that night, I decided I better come out to some people.
So you saw the book, or the book you saw?
Oh, I was called because I was called by people who'd seen page proofs. So I decided I better tell some other members. And I began to come out to a lot of the members then. They were immensely supportive. Tip O'Neill was troubled by it. I mean, Tip, he's a man of a different generation, and he was personally okay, but he was clearly bothered by it. As I said to people earlier, I had heard Tip was quoted me, I'm sure this is true, saying, oh, geez, I guess we're going to have another issue to deal with. They tell me Barney Frank's going to come out of the room. I mean, he did have a kind of a malapropist approach. He was a very bright man, but he would sometimes garble things a little. By the way, USA Today and the Boston Globe both asked me at that point, and I said, I'm not going to discuss it, and they didn't run the stories.
Why? Why at that point had you decided?
Not to discuss it?
Yeah.
Or? I wasn't ready to do it emotionally, and I didn't want to come out in the context of that book. But I did think, okay, I think I want to make it public. And then it was Stu McKinney's funeral when I made the decision. Stu McKinney was a terrific guy, congressman, died of AIDS, had a gay side of him. Actually, somebody who wants to talk about Stu, who was basically straight in Connecticut and gay down here, said, oh, that must be what they mean by AC/DC. But he was a wonderful man, and I went to his funeral, and it was a very emotional time for me. I was very emotionally moved and crying.
Were you friends?
Yeah, we worked together. We hadn't talked much about being gay. We talked a little bit about it.
But you knew he was
I'd
gay.
see him in Mr. Henry's, yeah.
I'm sorry?
And I'd see him in a gay restaurant down here on the hill. And then the woman who was the soloist at the funeral first sang Amazing Grace and then sang That's What Friends Are For. And that really tore me up. A couple of my friends who knew, why I was as upset as I was were very gracious and supportive afterwards. And then the scuffle ensued in the newspapers about was he gay, wasn't he gay, and understandably, but I think mistakenly, some members of his family said, well, they thought he got AIDS from a blood transfusion years ago. That wasn't true.
This is from his family.
Yeah. It wasn't a good idea to say that. They made some people nervous. I just decided that, hey, I could walk across the street tomorrow and get hit by a truck. I'm not going to have people engage in that bullshit after I'm dead. And I said, that's it, I got to do it. So I wrestled with it. And then I said, then a couple of months ensued in which I told a couple of reporters, I'm ready to come out. They said, good, and make an announcement. I said, no, if you ask me, I'll tell you. And they would say, well, no, you have to tell us. I said, well, I'm not going to volunteer it. I mean, I have nothing to volunteer. I do not feel comfortable volunteering it. My position is that I have nothing to announce and nothing to deny. Right, if you ask me a question, I will give you an honest answer. I answer questions about everything. I tell people how much money I make, what rent I pay, what I eat. I mean, I answer questions about everything except this. And if I only don't answer about that, people have a right to infer that I'm ashamed of something. Maybe not ashamed, but afraid of adverse consequences, but maybe ashamed. So I said, if you ask me, I'll tell you. So finally, a reporter from the Boston Globe asked me. And I said, are you gay? I said, yes, so what?
And that broke it.
That broke it. It was in the, you were here on the second anniversary. June 1st, 1987, it was in the paper.
Today's the second anniversary.
Yeah. Memorial Day weekend. Friday night, I was very scared. I had dinner with some friends at a gay-oriented restaurant. I really wanted to be comforted.
What were you afraid of?
A couple of things. I was afraid of losing my seat, losing my influence. I was uncomfortable with the notion that I would be walking around and absolute strangers would be speculating on the most intimate parts of my life. That people who had befriended me would reject me. All the insecurities I ever had as a kid come flooding back.
Did you realize, you had to realize, what a moment in history this was?
I repressed that. I mean, I can't deal with that.
Okay, it's too much.
Well, I got to live my life as a human being, and look, my ego's big, and I can get, the best thing I can do is to just, yeah, sure, I'm conscious of what kind of an image I present as a gay person, and I think about that. And the mail was very gratifying.
What are some of the things you heard from people?
The nicest thing was the guy who said, my brother would stop speaking to me when I come out to him, and then he wrote to me, he said, well, Christ, if I can vote for a gay congressman, I can talk to my own brother. And then a lot of kids, particularly.
What did kids say?
Mostly it was thank you, and you made it easier for us. So the response was much better than I anticipated it would be. And I would tell you, I think I lost my vote total this year was probably about 4% less than it would have been in the first year.
You think it was directly affected?
Yeah, I mean, I lost something because of it, so I think it's only about 4 points. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's had any negative effect on my role here. I mean, I will say, having done it, it is such a relief, and I feel so much better that even though it was only 2 years ago, I cannot remember what it was like not to be out.
Barney Frank served in the U.S. House of Representatives for 32 years and was widely considered one of its most influential and passionately persuasive members. In 2007, the year the subprime mortgage crisis broke, Frank became chair of the House Financial Services Committee and had a prominent seat at the table as D.C.'s most powerful tried to avert an economic apocalypse. In the aftermath of the crisis, he was the lead co-author of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, the largest overhaul of U.S. financial regulations since the 1930s. During his final year in office in 2012, Frank tied the knot with his partner, Jim Reddy, becoming the first member of Congress to enter into a same-sex marriage. The wedding ceremony was officiated by then Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, who asked the grooms whether they would love each other, quote, under the Democrats or the Republicans, for better or for worse, on MSNBC or on Fox. They said they would, and they did. Barney Frank died on May 19, 2026. He was 86 years old. Many thanks to everyone who makes Making Gay History possible, including producer Inga Detaya, photo editor Michael Green, and our social media producers Christiana Pena and Nick Porter. Our studio engineers were Kathleen Conti and Catherine Cook at CDM Sound Studios. Fritz Myers composed our theme music. Special thanks to our founding editor and producer, Sarah Birmingham, and our founding production partner, Jenna Weiss-Berman. Thank you also to the New York Public Library Manuscripts and Archives Division for their ongoing assistance. Season 15 of this podcast has been made possible with funding from the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, Ty Ashford and Nicholas Chitkoff, Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, Mitchell Drazen, the Calamus Foundation, Christopher Street Financial, the Marcus Family Foundation, the Kipper Family Foundation, Rick Hoffman, Bill Cux, Rick Fischel, Esmond and Jerome Harmsworth, the Embry Family Foundation, Mary Cadigan and Lee Wilson, Robert Gober and Donald Moffat, Greg Adgate, the Eichholt Scott Family Trust, Maureen Bennett, Hal Brody and Don Smith, Robert Dodd, and Kathy Dancer, Dalton's mom. To learn more about the people and stories we feature, head to makinggayhistory.org, where you'll find links to additional information and archival photos, as well as episode transcripts. I'm Eric Marcus. So long, until next time.